Welcome to another quiet journey through the dim corridors of the past. Tonight, let the rhythms of the ancient sea rock you gently towards sleep. You are listening to the Unsleeping Historian, where we unfold stories of forgotten lives in distant times, not to stir the mind, but to soothe it, not to excite, but to ease. Tonight's voyage begins not in a temple or colosseum, but far from land, at sea. The Roman world was vast and land-loving, but it was also bound together by ships. Ships that carried grain from Egypt, soldiers to distant frontiers, marble from Greece, amphorae brimming with olive oil from Misr. And while we remember the generals, the emperors, and the orators, we often forget the sailors, the men who rode and slept, who bailed and hauled, who fed the empire with their backs and blistered palms. In this episode, we explore the quiet miseries and muted glories of life at sea. In the ancient Roman world, we begin on a grain ship, crowded and salt-soaked, as we imagine what it truly meant to live and labor on one of Rome's floating lifelines. Then we turn to a single wreck, its wood darkened by time, its amphorae, still whispering of trade and tragedy. After that, we'll drift into the culture of Roman sailors themselves, the sea gods they prayed to, the ink they wore on their skin, and the graffiti they scratched into ship timbers and port walls. And finally, we'll leave the brine behind and walk quietly through the gardens and marble atriums of the Roman elite, men who relied on those ships, but rarely set foot on them. So now, settle in, let your breathing slow. Imagine the faint creak of a ship's hull in calm waters, the distant cry of gulls, the salty breeze, and let us begin. Imagine yourself waking in darkness, not the soft kind that comes with early dawn, but a dense, damp blackness, thick with the scent of bilge water, old rope, tar, and men. You are lying on a wooden plank, your designated sleeping space. There is no mattress, no cushion, just worn timber beneath your back. Around you, the soft groans of other sailors, shifting, scratching, coughing quietly. The air is unmoving, slightly sour. Somewhere nearby, a rat scurries, its claws faint against the wood. This, your morning, if one can call it that, aboard a Roman grain ship. The term galleon is a bit of a misnomer, a later word, but it conjures the right image. Heavy vessel tasked with the thankless job of moving bulk goods across vast, uncertain seas. Roman grain ships, especially the Alexandrian ones, were enormous for their time, some over 180 feet long, with 3 masts and thick, rounded hulls designed for cargo rather than speed. They sailed from Egypt to Rome, bearing wheat for the Messiah. Their passage fed a city of 1 million mouths. But they were not vessels of leisure, nor were they kind to the men who worked aboard them. Your shift begins before the sun. There are no clocks, only the schedule of labor, dictated by the needs of the ship. You are roused by a fellow sailor's nudging foot or the bark of a bosun. There is no place to stretch. You dress, though. Dressing means adjusting a short, salt-stiffened tunic, and perhaps checking the tightness of the rope belt that holds your scant possessions in a leather pouch. Food is simple. A bit of hard-taggedness, dry biscuit made of flour and water, riddled often with weevils. You eat it anyway. The insects are protein, after all, and no one has the energy to be. If you're fortunate, there's some dried fig or a piece of olive. Sometimes, a bit of sour wine is shared, diluted to stretch further. Water is brackish, stored in heavy ceramic amphorae, and often takes on the flavor of mold and clay. The day's tasks are relentless. You might be hauling rope, trimming sails, caulking seams, or bailing out bilge water with a wooden scoop. If the ship is becalmed, you may even be put to rowing, yes, even on vessels that were technically oars are often present for maneuvering in harbors or during moments of peril, and they require every hand. The rhythm is punishing. Your palms blister, your muscles scream. The sun, when it rises, offers no mercy. Its heat turns the deck into a slow-roasting platform. Shade is scarce. You learn to keep your head down, to work without question, and to conserve your words. Clothing is minimal. Feet are usually bare or wrapped in cloth. Sandals are impractical here. You learn to live with splinters, with rope burns, with calluses that never quite heal. Hygiene is primitive. There is no latrine, just a designated plank off the side of the ship. Privacy is non-existent. You relieve yourself among the sea spray and wind, hoping not to slip. You are often damp. Salt clinks to your skin, drying in flaky patterns. Rain comes without warning. When storms strike, the ship becomes a different world entirely. Wind screams through the rigging, and the ship pitches violently. Men shout over the roar, their voices hoarse with effort and fear. Lightning reveals the soaked, shivering forms of sailors scrambling to secure sails or cut free rigging. You are lashed to a post, or to your fellow crew, for fear of being swept away. If you are lucky, the storm passes. If not, you might be one of the many who are quietly swallowed by the sea. Rest is a fleeting mercy. When your shift ends, if it ends, you return to your plank. It is still damp from the last downpour. You'll lie down again in the darkness. Your hands are raw. Your legs tremble. You listen to the soft slap of waves against the hull, the faint creak of rope, the snores of your fellow men. If you are fortunate, sleep comes before the rats do. Disease is common. Dysentery, scurvy, infections from simple cuts. There is little in the way of medicine. Vinegar, perhaps, for wounds. The ship's carpenter is often your surgeon. You learn to live with pain, to ignore the itch of lice, to endure the heat of fever. There are moments of respite, though. When the wind is steady and the sea calm, you may sit and mend nets. You may swap quiet stories with your crew. A song might raise a rhythmic chant to ease the labor, in Greek, Latin, or a sailor's patois that borrows from every port. These are the moments that preserve you. A crude joke, a moment of laughter, a glimpse of the stars sharp and clear in the black dome of night. You may think now of the roaming navy, of triremes and martial glory, but this is not that world. This is not the fleet of war, but of work. Not a ship of heroes, but of laborers. The cargo matters more than the crew. Your purpose is to keep the wheat dry, to reach the port, to unload and reload, and to do it again. Month after month, voyage after voyage. Alexandria to Puteoli, Carthage to Ostia. If the gods are kind, you return. If not, your ship disappears beneath the waves, and your name is never spoken again. And so, you see, the glory of empire rested on backs like yours, on arms that hold, on legs that never rested. The grandeur of Rome's feasts and festivals, the bread of its plebs, the grain for its armies, all of it passed through these narrow decks, soaked in sweat and sea salt. Let us rest here a while, on the gently rocking deck. The sails flap softly above. The sea whispers its age-old lullaby. And when you are ready, we will dive beneath the waves, into the past once more, to uncover a ship that never reached its port. Now, let us drift away from the creaking deck and strained voices of a working Roman grain ship, and sink, slowly, beneath the warm waters of the eastern Mediterranean, down where the sunlight softens and dims, where silence wraps around sunken wood, and coral blooms quietly in forgotten corners. Here, resting off the northern coast of Cyprus, lies the Chyenia Shipwreck, a relic of the classical world, preserved not in museum glass, but in time and tide. Discovered in 1965 by a Greek Cypriot diver named Andreas Karyalou, the Kyrenia wreck revealed itself slowly. A shadow beneath the water, a scatter of amphiry, a suggestion of ribs beneath the sand. What it offered historians was not the remains of a warship or an imperial galley, but something quieter, and in many ways more revealing. The bones of a modest merchant vessel, lost sometime around 300 BC. Though not Roman in origin, predating the empire by centuries, this ship sailed the same seas, bore similar goods, and carried the same kinds of stories. Its preservation gave us something rare, not a tale of conquest, but of commerce, not a chronicle of battles, but of daily life. Now resting beneath the sea, the Kyrenia ship was about 47 feet long, compact by our modern standards, but seaworthy. It had a single square sail, its mast long vanished by the time of discovery. The hull was carvel built, its planks laid edge to edge, then stitched and pegged with care. The wood was Aleppo pine, fragrant and strike-grained, still bearing the marks of ancient tools. A faint scent of resin and brine lingered even after centuries in the sea. Its cargo was scattered, but rich in clues. Most prominent were the amphilarge ceramic vessels with narrow necks and twin handles. Over 400 were found aboard, many stamped with the markings of Rhodes, others from Kos, and some from Nid. These weren't just shipping containers, they were passports, signatures, records of origin. Inside, they had once held wine, thick and sweet, perhaps flavored with herbs or even pine resin to help preserve it. There were also millstones, heavy and worn from use, likely used as ballast, but also valuable cargo in their own right. Fragments of almonds, olives, and pomegranates were nestled in the sediment, evidence of the ship's provisions, or perhaps small-scale trade. Most haunting, perhaps, with the personal items, a few wooden cups, a hand-carved comb, metal strigils used for scraping the skin clean after oiling the body. There was a board game, its playing pieces scattered but present. 4 bronze coins were found beneath a beam near the stern paps, an offering, or a sailor's small savings, tucked away for safety. There were signs of repair plugs and patches in the hull, old wounds carefully mended with skill. This was a working ship, cared for by men who knew the sea well, and yet it did not reach its next port. We do not know its final voyage's cause, whether storm, or attack, or simple miscalculation. The sea keeps her secrets close. The Kyrenia wreck was excavated carefully over 4 summers, each dive revealing more of its structure. Sand was brushed gently away by hand. Photographs were taken inch by inch. Amphiry were mapped, recorded, and lifted to the surface in cradles of rope. Then, with infinite patience, the entire hull was painstakingly reconstructed, first in drawings, then in wood. A full-scale replica was later built. Kyrenia II, launched in 1985, to test how the original may have sailed. It moved with grace, its single sail catching the Cypriot breeze, a living experiment in ancient engineering. But even more than the ship's construction, what the Kyrenia gave us was a glimpse into a world beneath the world, a network of trade, largely invisible in written histories, quiet voyages between islands, goods exchanged, hands shaken, songs sung over cargoes of wine and oil, the lives of sailors and merchants who left no statues or epics behind, but whose hands kept economies afloat. Imagine now the final hours of the Kyrenia's voyage. The sea is calm. The sail is full. The scent of pine resin from the amphiry mixes with the salt air. A dolphin breaches nearby, catching the eye of a sailor at the tiller. Below deck, another adjusts a rope, checks the lashings on a stack of cargo. They speak in low voices, perhaps in Koine Greek, perhaps a mix of island dialects. The sun begins its descent. The coastline of Cyprus, familiar and welcoming, grows larger on the horizon. Then perhaps a gust, a sharp shift of wind, the sudden appearance of rocks just beneath the surface, or a squall that materializes from nothing, battering the small ship with fierce waves. The Kyrenia lists. Its hull strikes stone. Water pours in. Cargo shifts violently. Shouts ring out. Men scramble. And then, just as suddenly, it is gone, down into the depths, carrying with it its wine, its millstones, its carved game pieces, and its silence. For over 2 millennia, it slept, until a diver, just enjoying the sea, glimpsed the curve of a jar beneath the sand. Now the Kyrenia lives again, not in motion, but in memory, in museum displays, in scale models, in the blueprints of marine archaeologists, and in our own quiet thoughts, as we imagine the creak of her timbers, the flap of her sail, the simple courage of her crew. The Roman world, when it came, built on the same roots. Its grain ships followed the same winds, passed the same rocky shores, and its sailors, like those of the Kyrenia, lived not for glory, but for survival, for the next safe harbor, for the next cargo safely delivered. So let us linger here, with the picture her resting on the seabed, fish darting through her ribs, amphiry tipped gently to one side, as though still waiting to be lifted, the quiet hum of underwater stillness all around. And when you're ready, we'll surface again, to learn not about the ships themselves, but the men who sailed them, their gods, their fear, the secrets they inked into their skin. Let us rise slowly now, from the silence of the seafloor, back into the soft motion of a ship's deck. But this time, we're not looking at planks or cargo. We are listening, observing, not the mechanics of sailing, but the people, their quiet rituals, their whispered beliefs, the signs they carved into wood and wore upon their skin. Because the world of the Roman sailor was rich with meaning, hidden in plain sight. Not the Latin of Cicero or the laws of the Senate, but a different language, made of symbols, gestures, and superstition. A language of survival at sea. We begin with the skin. Tattooing, while not widespread among the Roman elite, was common in lower rank sand, especially among sailors. The ink was often simple, made from soot and vinegar, or whatever was at hand. The tools were rudimentary. A sharp needle, a steady hand, no anesthesia, just resolve and meaning. Sailors might bear images of Neptune, god of the sea, his trident raised, his bearded face etched in dark strokes. Others marked their skin with dolphins, symbols of speed and divine protection. Some chose anchors, a steady ensign in a life adrift. These tattoos were not art for beauty's sake. They were charms, prayers, marks of belonging. A sailor's body became a journal of where he had been and what he believed. The lines might fade with salt and sun, but their meaning did not. Graffiti, too, played its part. In ports across the empire from Ostia to Carthage, to Alexandria, sailors left behind their marks, scratched into stone walls, carved into wooden beams, etched in the dark corners of taverns. Names, crews, crude, drawings of ships with high curling prows, anchors, and fish, vulgar jokes, simple invocations to gods. Mercury guide us, Neptune, be kind. These were not declarations for history books. They were declarations for their peers. A way of saying, I was here. A trace of presence in a life defined by movement. You might also find phallic symbols common in Roman superstitions, not only to ward off envy and evil, but to call down good luck. The sea, after all, was full of unseen forces. Better to stay on the right side of them. And there were the gods themselves. Though Neptune was central, Roman sailors were polyglot in their devotions. Ishtar, the mother goddess from the east. Isis, beloved of Egyptian mariners. Castor and Pollux, the twin protectors who, it was said, appeared as lights upon the masts during storms. A good omen. If you saw that flickering glow we now call St. Elmo's fire, you thanked the twins and held your course. Offerings were made before a coin tossed into the water, a pinch of wine poured into the waves, quiet words spoken while touching the ship's hull. These were not formal ceremonies, but everyday habits, passed from old sailors to new, from ship to ship, in a long line of unspoken tradition. When storms came, and they always came, there were chants, rhythmic prayers, muttered between gritted teeth. Some invoked Jupiter to calm the sky, others sang to lesser sea spirits. The line between sailor and mystic blurred, anything to push back the chaos. Even the tools of the trade took on meaning. Knots, for example, had names and lore. The lover's knot, the hangman's twist, the weeping bend. Each had a purpose, but also a story. Some were said to bring fortune. Others were never tied unless absolutely necessary, lest they anger fate. Language, too, evolved on board. Though Latin was the official tongue of Rome, the sea had its own dialect, mix of Greek, Phoenician, Egyptian, and slang born of necessity. Commands were barked in clipped rhythms. Hilaire, to haul. Fair, to carry. Vinsire, to lash. These words echoed between decks, shaping days of labor into a kind of chant. Stories were told as well. When the sails were trimmed and the sea was calm, and the stars began to prick the sky, sailors would sit and talk. Tales of sea monsters, giant squids that could crush a ship, serpents that coiled through the depths. Some swore they had seen them. Others laughed, but all listened, because even laughter at sea has its edge. And in these stories, truth and myth mingled. Perhaps a storm had lifted a whale's back above the waves, mistaken for an island. Perhaps the eerie sound of the wind through the rigging became the wail of a drowned crew. The sea turned facts into fables with ease. Even dreams mattered. Some sailors believed dreams at sea held power. The division of a dead relative was a warning that dreaming of calm waters meant rough days ahead. Interpretations varied, but the belief remained. The sea did not forget, and it did not forgive. Carelessness. The folk culture of Roman sailors was not written down. It lived in hands and habits, in charms tied to a wrist, in nicknames muttered below deck, in songs that never saw parchment, but lingered in the mind. Soft melodies to ease the rhythm of work. One such work chant, reconstructed from fragments, went something like, row, row, oh, sons of Mars, steady the helm, smooth the stars, wind in our back, grain in our hold. The sea is deep, the gods are old. Perhaps it was never sung in those exact words, but the sentiment is ancient, endurance, reverence, and the deep wish to survive. Let us pause here. Among these sailors and their whispered words, the sea stretches out around them, dark and wide, but they know its moods. They speak its language, not in words, but in ritual. Their lives, unseen by emperors, unsung by poets, nevertheless carried the empire forward. And now, let us step ashore, far from salt and toil, from tattoos and chants, into a different Rome altogether. There, among perfumed courtyards and gleaming bathhouses, another kind of day unfolds. One of luxury, not labor, of silk and leisure. While grain ships grind across the sea to feed it, Now, step away from the rigging and ropes. Let the salt air fade from your skin. We are no longer aboard a ship. We are no longer among calloused hands and storm-worn faces. We are in Rome. Not the Rome of forums and orations, but the quiet, gilded corridors of an elite Roman villa. The kind of place that never smells of fish or pitch, but of crushed laurel, lavender oil, and warm bread. Here, far from the sea's hardship, another kind of day begins. It is early morning in the Palatine Hill district. The sun lifts gently over tiled roofs, casting golden light on columns and gardens below. A senator, a man of rank, education, and inherited wealth, wakes not to a boatswain's call, but to the hush of a servant drawing back fine linen curtains. Birds sing in the fig trees. Somewhere nearby, a fountain gurgles. He lies in a broad bed, the sheets soft, the air already perfumed by incense. He does not dress himself. A slave brings a fresh tunic, white, pressed, and subtly embroidered. Sandals are set beside a marble basin of cool water. His morning begins not with labor, but with cleanliness. There is no need to hurry. The pace of elite Roman life is deliberate, measured, never rushed. Time itself feels like a luxury. After a light meal, perhaps dates, olives, a bit of honeyed bread, he strolls to the baths. They are centers of life, relaxation, and soft conversation. The baths of Caracalla, for instance, or the more intimate suburban thermi, offer pools of varying temperatures, tepidarium, warm, hot, and cold. He is scrubbed with oil and a curved strigil, the day's sweat wiped away before it begins. Musicians play quietly. Philosophers speak in low tones about ethics or astronomy. Others lounge, half submerged, gossiping about grain prices or the latest scandal in the Senate. This, too, is politics. Leisure with consequence. From the baths, he returns home. His villa is not ostentatious true. Roman nobility disdains gaudy excess, but white plaster walls, cool stone floors, shaded peristyles, lined with flowering vines. A household of servants moves discreetly, preparing meals, tending fires, arranging scrolls in the library. The senator's midday hours may include reading Cicero, Seneca, Virgil, or perhaps dictating letters to a scribe, his voice calm and steady as wax tablets filled with script. A visit from a client, a man of lower status, offering loyalty in return for patronage. The client bows, delivers a small gift, receives advice or a minor favor. These meetings reinforce the fabric of Roman society, patron and client, power and deference. At noon, the villa quiets. The heat of the day settles over Rome like a heavy blanket. In shaded rooms, shutters closed, many nap. The senator may recline in the triclinium. Simple food, cheese, lentils. The main meal will come later. Outside, the streets of Rome bustle. Merchants shouting, children playing, oxen groaning under loads of fruit but within these high villa walls, all remains serene. Afternoon brings correspondence, perhaps a short stroll to the forum, a short hearing in court, or a meeting with other senators. But such work is interspersed with reflection, with light reading, with silence. The real theater of the day, the true spectacle, comes in the evening. The scena, the evening banquet, is not just nourishment, it is performance. Politics, status, and philosophy, wrapped in roasted peacock and honeyed wine. Guests arrive just before dusk, entering through a grand atrium. Their names are announced, not loudly, but with precision. They are led through colonnaded gardens to the triclinium once more, now decorated with flowers and soft lamps. Each guest knows where they will clean order matters. The most honored are placed closest to the host. Food is presented in stages. First, crustaceo, sea urchin, seasoned eggs, dates stuffed with almonds. Then the prima mensa, perhaps roasted duck with garum, a pungent fish sauce, beloved by Romans. Boiled sows, wooder, dishes both extravagant and simple. Wine flows, diluted with water, poured from jugs of painted clay or silver. Cups never remain empty. Slaves move silently. Conversation grows in volume, then softens again. A poet might recite a few verses. A philosopher might offer a short discourse. A hired musician may pluck soft notes on The final course secundaments is sweet. Figs drizzled with honey. Cheesecakes with poppy seeds. Pears stewed in wine. As the light fades entirely, torches are lit. The air grows cooler. The host smiles but watches carefully. Alliances are tested here. Loyalties reinforced with every shared plate. A senator's power lies not only in votes or oratory, but in these quiet rituals. By late evening, the guests depart, their sandals tapping softly on the marble. The senator retires again, perhaps pausing by his lararium, his household shrine, to murmur a brief prayer to his ancestors. His day ends in silence. Outside, beyond the villa's gates, Rome remains alive. The plebeian tenements, the bathhouse gossip, the distant flicker of torchlight in alleyways, and beyond that still, the sea. Ships, somewhere out there, creak under moonlight. Men sleep curled on damp planks. The senator will never meet them, never know their names, but they move the grain that fills his kitchens, the wine that stains his cups, the oil that glistens on his skin. One world reclines in marble, the other rose, unseen, yet both are Rome. And so, as this final segment draws to a close, let us reflect gently on the distances within a single empire, between oar and goblet, between salt and rosewater, between the calloused hand and the jeweled ring. All of it part of a world that is long gone, yet lingers still in the shapes of things. And now, the sails have been furled. The ship is quiet. The banquet has ended. The sea has stilled. You've journeyed tonight through the forgotten layers of ancient life, not through battles or triumphal arches, but through the slow, steady rhythms of existence that once shaped a world. You've slept in the shadows of a Roman grain ship, where damp timbers creaked above your head and the scent of pitch lingered on your clothes. You've stood beside the sunken ribs of the Kyrenia, imagined the soft bloom of coral across its deck, and listened for the echoes of voices long lost to the tide. You've traced the tattoos of ancient sailors, deciphered the coded graffiti of those who sailed by instinct and superstition, and you've stepped softly through the perfumed air of a senator's villa, where leisure and power mingled in the shade of olive trees. From the bilge water to the bathhouse, from the rat-scratched planks of the lower deck, to the polished marble of a Roman atrium. Tonight has shown you the distance between two lives lived beneath the same sun, and yet, across all of it one thread remains. A quiet perseverance. Whether hauling rope or lifting goblets, sailing stormy waters or hosting twilight banquets, the people of Rome lived as we do day by day, with fatigue and laughter, with small joys and familiar routines. Their world, though vast in empire and ambition, was made of ordinary moments, of meals, stories, songs, and sighs. Theirs was a world without electricity, without engines, without the soft hum of modern life. And still, they endured, they adapted, they left traces, faint and fragile, but there, waiting. And you've listened to them, in your mind's eye. You've sailed with them, eaten with them, rested with them. So now, let the past grow quiet once more. Let the waves soften into silence. The torches gutter low in the villa hall. The sailors sleep, their arms curled beneath their heads. The amphibians sway gently in the cargo hold. And you are still. Another story has ended. Another night draws in. And if your eyes are still open, feel them grow heavy now. You are safe. You are warm. You are far from storms and oars. Far from duty and dust. The modern world hums quietly around you, steady and soft. Thank you for traveling with the Unsleeping Historian. Until next time, sleep well.